Hey, everybody. It's another Friday and another Experience Investigators Ask Me Anything webinar. I'm Jeannie Walters. It's good to see you all here. Thanks for joining us. Today, we're talking about something that I think is often overlooked in customer experience and when we're thinking about that end-to-end customer journey that our customers have with our brand. And that's this idea of reassurance and how by injecting reassurance into the customer journey, we can actually improve trust. We can proactively build that trust with customers. So, as always, we have David Hornreich with us today, who will be helping out. Hi, David.
Hello. How's everybody doing? Great to be here.
Good to see you. And you're coming to us live from Seattle.
Live from Seattle, which is stereotypically overcast and threatening rain as we speak.
Oh, perfect.
Yeah,
It's a little bit like that here in Chicago as well, but it's really hot today too. So we've got that going for us.
love it.
So, as people join us, let us know where you're joining us from. Let us know what the weather's doing where you are. And if you have questions, please feel free to drop those into the chat as we go.
Mhm.
After the presentation, we always love to address your questions and just have a conversation here too. So, let us know, and I think we should go ahead and get started.
Let's do it.
All right, great. Well, as we talk about reassurance, one of the things that comes to mind is, why do we need to reassure somebody if we are just starting off or just, proactively investing in the journey? And in a way, think about an event like this. We're trying to let you know some of those expectations in advance. That's a reassuring move. So it's just a way to really set the stage for customers. Now, for those of you who don't know me, I'm Jeannie Walters, and I am founder and CEO of Experience Investigators. At Experience Investigators, our mission is to create fewer ruined days for customers. We work with leaders of all types who want to provide meaningful customer experiences that drive business results. And we do that through workshops and training, as well as keynote speaking and a lot of coaching as well for executives, coaching and consulting. So if you have a need, if you have questions, feel free to reach out. We love hearing from you. We love hearing about the things that you're working on and to see if we can help you deliver those meaningful customer experiences. So let's go ahead and jump into our topic today. First of all, what does reassurance mean? This is kind of a silly thing to start with because I'm sure you all know this, but according to the dictionary, this is the action of removing someone's doubts or fears. And what I love about thinking through this is there are a lot of assumptions here. The assumptions are that you understand what those doubts and fears are, that you understand what are the obstacles to that trust that you have to remove. But I think that that's a big leap. We have to make sure that we are actively looking to understand our customers and the doubts and fears that they might have so that we can reassure them moving forward. But in customer experience specifically, I see this as a proactive way to build trust. And why that's so important is because that's what everything is based on in the relationship. If a customer doesn't trust you, if a customer doesn't trust the process, then they're going to start doubting. They're going to start having fears that things aren't working. So, reassurance is about proactively looking at those points and making sure that we can move through that journey with our customers in a really proactive and reassuring way. And so, a small act of reassurance can go a long way to removing that fear and doubt. And there are so many opportunities to do this. But like I said, we have to understand where and how and what those fears and doubts actually are. So it takes some effort to really make sure that we are proactively understanding our customers and that we're looking for these points along the journey so we can provide that reassurance. So, how do you know when a customer has a doubt or fear? That's what we're going to be talking about today. So, finding moments of customer reassurance, there are three things that I suggest here. First of all, ask yourself, are there common challenges that certain customers have? Do you know about those points of friction? Do you know that certain segments or personas are dealing with challenges that you can provide reassurance for, that you can proactively let them know that they can trust and that you can remove some of those doubts? Another question, do customers get reassurances when things go into the unknown? This is so important in digital. A lot of times when we are interacting with a digital channel, like on a website or on a mobile app, we literally press a fake button, we hit a point on our screen, or we click a mouse, and things happen behind the scenes, and we are just trusting that those things are happening. But if we don't get that reassurance in that moment, it's an opportunity where you might lose some trust, or you might have those doubts creep in to the way a customer feels about their experience. Another thing here, some of you know this already. You know that there are hiccups in the process, in the system, in your customer's journey that actually create doubt and fear. And you know this because customers tell you, because they come back with feedback and they say, you know what, I didn't know what happened there. Or they have to call your contact center to get reassurance. Did that actually go out for delivery? Do you actually know when somebody's going to get back to me? All of those points. When customers are asking those types of questions, they are looking for reassurance. And basically, they are telling you that you were not proactive enough. You were not there to take away those fears and doubts. So they had to do something about it themselves. So this is all really important because customers have told us that, you know what, they are kind of sick of repeating themselves. They don't want to not be known. They want to be recognized where they are on the journey. And in fact, according to a report from Salesforce, 63% of consumers expect you as the brand, as the business, to know their unique needs and expectations. And that's so important because when we're talking about reassurance, we're also talking about reassuring the customer that we do know them. We know where they are on the journey. We know that the processes that they don't see are there to support them. When they have to call and repeat and let us know where they are on the journey, that is immediately inserting doubt into the customer experience. So, really take a moment to think about, are there these common challenges that customers have? Do they ask these questions about, delivery times or people getting back to them? If in B2B, that's a big one. All of these different points along the journey, if they are really challenged by that, how can you proactively design a process to insert reassurance before they have to make that call, before they have to reach out to you? Now, the other thing to consider here are these different segments. There are different comfort levels with different segments of customers. So that means that you might have a group that is less familiar with digital channels. Well, what can you do to reassure them? What can you do to help them through that process so that you're building trust within that channel? What can you do with the people who maybe don't want to deal with interacting face to face? How can you still reassure them that what they're trying to do is being accomplished? Look for places where not only you're serving all your customers, but do you need to invest in some additional reassurance for some segments, some personas among your customer base? Really good question to ask yourself. And, 70% of customers have said that they want us to collaborate better within our organizations. They want businesses to collaborate across teams so that they don't have to repeat themselves. They don't have to be recognized based on whatever channel they're coming in. They're recognized as a whole customer who's on a very specific journey. So make sure that when we're looking at our own processes, when we're looking at the customer journey, we are considering that reassurance comes in a lot of different kind of flavors here. And one of the ways you can reassure a customer is to recognize where they are on their journey and do that proactively. And that means collaborating, cross-functional leadership, all those things, making sure you have the right data at the right moment so that if a customer does switch channels, they are still recognized and reassured that everything is fine, that they are on the journey they need to be on. Another question for you here. Do customers get reassurances when things go into the unknown? And this is so important because when we kind of evolved with all these different channels, sometimes it can seem so logical, right? Somebody will go through, order something on your website, pay for it, hit a button. Maybe you set some expectations there around you'll see your item in 2 to 3 weeks or whatever it is. But if they don't get that proactive reassurance, if they don't get something specifically to them, customers will feel a little unnerved that they don't really know what's happening. They're not sure if it worked. They're not sure if the payment went through. All of those places, especially along the digital channel, can be very, very helpful to look at as things go into the unknown. I'll give you an offline version of this too, but one of the things I want to highlight here is this data from Microsoft. Two-thirds of customers want proactive customer notifications. They want this reassurance. Now, consider for those of you who travel or have traveled a lot, one of the things that used to drive me crazy was if I had a request for the hotel, like if something was wrong in the room, and I would call down to the front desk and they would say, okay, we'll send somebody up. 20 minutes goes by, 30 minutes goes by, 40 minutes. When is the moment where I think they've forgotten about me and I have to call again? And when you call again, that's usually something that, they act like, oh, yeah, we're just behind. Just be patient. But if you don't proactively tell me that, if you don't set those expectations and reassure me that you will not forget about my issue, then that's going to lead to that anxiety and doubt in the process and in my own journey. So, any moment like that where you are basically trying to fix something for a customer, think about how can we set expectations in the right way, and then how can we reassure them that those expectations will be met. And if they're not met, how can you reassure them that they're not forgotten, that things are still happening when they can't see the process, they can't see the background. This is where actually service blueprinting can be very helpful. If we think through what is the ideal journey, and then we think through all those processes that have to happen on the back end, both the employees and their behavior, as well as what are the systems that need to happen. There's, what technology needs to be working that day. Look for those points in your service blueprint and consider what happens if this doesn't go according to plan. How can we reassure people? How can we make sure that customers know that this process is happening, even if they can't see it? And thank you. David just put up the link for our service blueprint resource. Feel free to go grab that. That can be very, and this is our LinkedIn Learning course. So check that out. Yeah, and that teaches you all about LinkedIn Learning, or all about service blueprinting and how you can do that and why it's so useful. So the last thing here is, are there hiccups in the system that create doubt and frustration? Every single time I meet with executive leaders and I ask them what's going right in the customer journey and what's going wrong, everybody already has an answer. I'm not saying that you won't uncover things with customer journey mapping and with looking at your data and all of those really important steps. But I also know that right now, today, you probably know a few of these places. You know where the journey isn't working in the way that you would want as a customer. You know that there are places that do cause doubt and frustration for your customers. So if you know those places, taking a few steps back in the customer journey and saying, okay, proactively, how can we let them know? How can we give them reassurance that either, yes, this thing is going to happen and here's how we're going to work through it, or, you know what, we are going to proactively address this so that you won't have that moment of doubt and frustration. There is a story of Dyson, who actually produces, high-end vacuum cleaners and things like that. They started realizing that one of the parts in their cleaners was breaking a little earlier than the rest of it. So they were getting calls to replace this part. So one of the things they did was send two. They would send two parts to a customer and explain, you know what, we want to make sure that you have what you need in order to keep this machine running to the best of its ability. And by doing that, they were reassuring the customer, yes, we know this isn't perfect, we're working on it, but in the meantime, here's something that we're going to provide you proactively so that you don't have to call, so that you have reassurance that you have what you need. So that's the type of thinking we need to apply sometimes. If we can't fix the root cause every time, we can reassure. We can proactively look at that and figure out, okay, what can we do to remove some of that doubt, some of that fear, and some of that anxiety before they actually run into those issues. So if you already know some issues, if just sitting here today, you're thinking of a few, jot a few of them down and then back up in the customer journey and think, what can we do to proactively reassure people here? Is it a workaround that we can guide them on? Is it just following up with them in the right moment and saying, you know what, this thing is going to happen, or you might have trouble with this. Let me help you with that. Those types of moments where we can proactively serve our customers and make sure that they feel seen and that they are served before they need service, those go so far to creating happier customers. And according to, HubSpot and so many other sources, 93% of in this case consumers were more likely to be repeat customers at companies where they have excellent customer service. Well, how do customers define excellent customer service? It's when they actually don't really need service. It's when they actually feel cared for and when they feel like everything is running smoothly and when the service is really proactive as well. So look for those places in your customer journey where you can insert reassurance to build that trust, to build that confidence with your customers, because that's what will keep them customers longer. That's what will encourage them to spend more with you. And that's what will encourage them to actually refer other customers to you. And customers who are referred in actually spend more money with a brand, and they do it quicker than if they weren't referred in. So there are all sorts of benefits to referring in customers as well. So reassurance is absolutely critical for building trust that lasts. And that's what this is all about right now. We are building and rebuilding trust with our customers all the time. Every single interaction, we are either building trust or we are eroding trust. And so looking for ways to reassure, ways to make sure that you are providing them those proactive places to remove those doubts and fears. It's so, so important. And in these last, 14, 15 months that we've lived through, this has a bigger meaning now, not just with customers, but with your employees. How are you reassuring your employees? How are you reaching out to your partners and the ecosystem that you have in order to provide business? So your suppliers, your vendors, folks like that in your ecosystem, what are you doing to reassure them as well? Because there has been so much uncertainty and so much change that if there's a way to proactively reassure somebody, that goes a long, long way right now. That is what we're doing. We're building trust with one another. And so I encourage you, if you haven't thought about this, if you're kind of questioning how do we find these things, look for customer journey mapping as a tool to really identify that. When you're doing the journey map, use that lens of, okay, where are the points that might fill somebody with doubt, that they might have a fear around, that cause anxiety, and then back up and look for those proactive ways to reassure customers throughout their journey. And if you need help on that, we have a workbook for customer journey mapping, and we also have an interactive tool. And so you can find those at the links. And if you haven't signed up for Year of CX, that's also a great way to get these tools. Our yearofcx.com, you can sign up and we will deliver several tools. Every few weeks, we release a new downloadable tool that's free that you can use to improve your customer experience. So at that point, I would love to hear your questions. I would love to hear, how have you reassured customers? What are you doing to really make sure that you're building trust with your customers throughout the customer journey?
Yeah, hey everybody. I want to start with a couple comments from Thais, who says, first of all, be transparent, signpost constantly, and then on top of that, if you do a bit of research, you can predict and estimate before there's an issue to kind
Mhm.
of identify where are those points where you need to reassure. So I think that's a really nice summation of a lot of things that you said, Jeannie.
Yeah, that's exactly right. It's all about that proactive view and looking at where are those points that are causing friction and what can we do in advance to eliminate them or at least reassure our customers that, we're there for them. We're going to support them through whatever that sticky part of the journey is.
So a little behind the scenes for everybody. Right before we started this broadcast, we were talking about people that we know who are trying to start traveling internationally. So I think that this question from Gianluca is super appropriate right now. He asks, do you think these concepts can be addressed to the tourist experience? Do you think that the tourist experience is a CX in tourism, or is it different than that? He's coming to us from sunny Italy, which
Oh,
sounds wonderful right
it
now.
does sound wonderful. Thank you for sharing that. Yeah, I think think about how many places in the tourism experience there are moments of doubt. Think about how many times somebody has to look around and think maybe they don't speak the language. Maybe they aren't sure what that sign means. Maybe they don't know, the customs and they need some help there. So I really love thinking through, how could you proactively kind of guide somebody and make sure that they do have those reassurances? Anybody who has taken like a tour where you have a local guide, that's a reassurance, right? That's somebody who knows the ways of wherever you are. So I would really look at that and figure out, where are those places where people might get stuck? Where are those places where we can provide a little more guidance, where we can reassure them and we can help them through? I mean, there are all sorts of ways that people struggle when they travel, and some people have different comfort levels with different things. And so looking at different segments here would be really helpful too. What do people need who are the adventurous? They want to get out there and see everything they can at the local level. How can we reassure them to do that in a safe way, in a way that they're going to get what they need? But then looking at, the more cautious traveler, the person who wants somebody to really show them everything piece by piece. What can we do to provide reassurance for them throughout their travel? So I really love thinking about what is the journey that somebody's on, quite literally in tourism, and how can we provide that level of reassurance and comfort so that they feel they build trust with wherever they're visiting. I mean, you think about the best trips that you've ever taken, and I feel like a lot of that is based on the people who are there to support you in those moments that you need it. And that's what we need to kind of build throughout this experience. On the flip side, I think planning the trip too, planning and doing digital research, and if you pay for something online, all of those things, that's reflective of the tourism experience too. So it's that whole journey, that end to end of kind of thinking through and planning all the way through to when you're coming back and showing everybody your wonderful pictures. So it's a great question. I think it would be really fun to explore in journey mapping and figuring out those points of reassurance.
And Thais adds on, as a solo backpacker, this is one of the things that I always test before messaging the hotel, looking
Mhm.
at social media, doing interaction. But yeah, we can definitely feel more vulnerable when we're traveling.
I love that you brought that up, because one of the things that happened a couple years ago was they realized that women business travelers had different needs and they needed different reassurances. So some hotels really did look at what is the experience like for a woman business traveler versus just business travelers. And the flagship Virgin Hotel here in Chicago, they really designed around the woman business traveler. And one of the things they did was things like better lighting in hallways, making sure that it was nice and bright. They did things like having a better makeup area, and simple things like that. But they did a lot around safety and around reassuring solo women business travelers that they understood, that they were really recognizing and reassuring them that this is going to be a safe place. And that's something, we don't always love thinking about this stuff, but we do. And that's why I thought that the whole design of it was so thoughtful, because it really was thinking about how can we reassure somebody every step of the way so that they know that they are safe and comfortable and have what they need to really succeed. So great point.
Yeah. And she follows up and says, this is one of the reasons we switched to Airbnb. The hosts are much more available in terms of
Mhm.
being helpful. And I know that's, especially as COVID has happened, that's been such a huge part of how Airbnb has
Mhm.
differentiated themselves.
And I think, think about all the reassurances we've gotten around uh, cleanliness and safety, right? Like
Mhm.
the airlines are talking about it, the hotels are talking about it. Airbnb has those different standards that they post right there. So as you're booking things, you're getting those reassurances that this is clean, you're going to be safe, all of that along the way.
And I put up a follow up question from Gianluca because it fits in perfectly with the conversation. Kind of on a larger scale, even outside of
Mhm.
travel, how has consumer reassurance changed during COVID-19 and what's coming next?
Yeah, good question. I do think the cleanliness thing is not going away. I think we're going to have to continue to really reassure people who are, especially in person, stores, restaurants, hotels, that type of thing. I also think that some of the conveniences are really appreciated and people actually want that. And one of the data points that came out recently was that patients actually like virtual waiting rooms for doctor visits over going into a crowded waiting room. And not just because of COVID, but because you're just there with sick people, right? So what's a good way to avoid sick people? Well, you can wait in your car, they text you when your appointment is ready and then you go in. And so I think things like that are kind of subtly reassuring people that we are still experiencing a level of anxiety here. Everybody has different levels of comfort. So I think, reinforcing the cleanliness and the safety, as well as looking for those points of convenience that people appreciate because it's reassuring. Another one that I'm really interested to see what happens is, right now, when you check in person at a hotel, a lot of a lot of hotels still don't have many options. You have to stand in line with other people, go up to the front desk and interact with somebody. Well, now they're coming out with more kiosks and things like that, but then you've got touch screens. So what does that mean? Well, can you have wipes there? What about the grocery store? All of these things that we've kind of grown accustomed to, I think we need to reassure people that that will continue because we all learned, you know what? Even if it wasn't COVID, this is how people get sick. This is how people bring things home to their family. So, looking at all of those little steps, I think will be really, really important. And then the other thing that I think is super important about reassurance right now is we have lived through so much uncertainty that it's hard to commit. So, customers are making bigger purchases, but they're actually doing that in different payment plans than before. People who are traveling are looking at the cancellation policy first because they want to know, they want that reassurance that, you know what, if something happens again and I can't make this trip, I'm going to be able to get out of this in a way that makes sense. So I think all of those things, we have to really look at what did people appreciate in the times of crisis that they will continue to appreciate moving forward. And I think those are some of the ways that we can look at the journey, the cancellation policy, the cleanliness, and the convenience.
I like it. Mark doesn't have a question, but he's got a lot of thoughts, and I want to share them and see if that inspires any thoughts from you, Jeannie. He says, "I love this topic. For me, work is almost always in data protection situations.
Mhm.
GDPR in Europe, making customer and employee journeys so complex." Making such solutions are impossible sometimes. Digital protection or data protection is important, but sometimes a less than smooth
Mhm.
journey.
Yeah. Oh, what a good question. Yeah, I think you bring up a really, really great point. I think we're going to need to reassure customers about their data privacy more and more and more and more as they become more familiar with what is GDPR and what does that mean for my data and all of these different things. Uh, Apple released that big thing in the last couple weeks about data privacy, and uh, some people understood it and some people didn't, but it was a way to really say out loud to customers, this is the control you have. We're giving you this control. And I think that is something we're going to start seeing more and more of as well. I would love to see where we get to a point where there's a centralized place for customers to really understand and make their own decisions about data privacy. We're not there yet. And part of it is exactly the complexity that you're grappling with, because this is really complex stuff, especially when we don't have some of these centralized data points. So everything is out there in different ways, and customers don't understand that. And so I think reassuring and providing that proactive way to guide somebody through and say, this is what it means. This is what it means to you. And these are the choices that you can make. I think we're going to start seeing more and more of that type of communication for customers as they become more familiar with, what does this mean? What does it mean to have my data private or not? What, how does that affect my life? What if it gets out there? What are the consequences? So I think that's really interesting. The other part of this that I think is going to be really interesting, and I'm biased because I'm a parent here, but I think looking at how do you protect your kids moving forward and how do you educate them with data privacy, that's huge. I think that is something that we haven't addressed enough of, and that we need to provide parents more reassurance in ways that are logical and realistic, because I think right now we kind of group kids as, okay, they're just kids over here and then they become adults. But there's this whole journey that they're on where you have to help them really navigate the digital world and figure that out, because they're going to be there. And so what can we do to reassure parents and families that, certain points along the journey, you have to make some decisions and this is what it means for those decisions. So I think this is, I mean, fascinating and complex, and I think it's so in line with what we're talking about today, which is reassurance. And so looking for those places where you can reassure, you know what, we heard you, we have some guidance for you, and we're going to help you through this. That's the next phase that I think we're entering into with all this data privacy and all of those good big meaty topics.
Gianluca brings up a really good point here that kind of because of COVID, we're in this moment where there's an emotional exchange that we haven't really had before between companies and consumers because we're all facing
Mhm.
such similar difficulties. So being all in the same situation with all of the same worries gives us this kind of unique opportunity to improve CX in a way that we haven't really seen before.
I I totally agree, and I hope you're right that it will continue, because we've talked about this on these webinars. In some ways, we have experienced empathy and compassion for one another around the globe in ways that we haven't seen before, and that's because we literally have all been going through so many similar challenges, that we understand one another in ways that I hope will continue, because that really will make a better world, not just customer experience. It will really help us connect and kind of elevate each other in ways that I really hope we have learned and internalized, because it was very meaningful. And I think we all became more vulnerable with one another, including companies who had to say, you know what, our supply chain broke down because of COVID, or we don't have enough employees right now, or we had to close very suddenly. We witnessed all of that as customers, and we understood it because we were all in this together. So it's a really great point.
And there's a great conversation going on in the chat. Thais responding to Gianluca about how we can map our touch points to reassure customers, and it just warms my heart. I love seeing the sort of side chat going on during this that's inspired by the topics that we bring up. Along those lines, I want to highlight a comment from Tyler, a good reminder here that this also applies to employee experience.
Mhm.
A lot of the changes that we've made during COVID have delighted our employees. And now the question is, how can we keep them around permanently in some form? I'm sure we've all heard stories of some companies who are retracting those and getting a lot of pushback from employees. So any thoughts on
Yeah.
that, Jeannie?
It's another great point. Thank you for bringing that up, Tyler. Good to see you as always. Uh, I think this is going to be another big conversation, and some brands are already getting it wrong, right? They're already starting to take away certain things that employees have appreciated. A lot of data is coming out about how people are really rethinking the value of working somewhere with a long commute, because they realized that they could get so much more done working at home. They didn't have to give up 2 to 3 hours of their day in the car or on the train. And they are valuing that in a different way. So I think, yeah, employers are really going to have to think through how much work from home they'll allow, how much remote, how do they respond to all of that for their employees. And the other thing here is that comfort level. There are people who are not really comfortable yet. Even here in the United States, there are a lot of people who are fully vaccinated now. A lot of fully vaccinated people still are anxious about going back to a crowd, about going back to an office where maybe they're sitting shoulder to shoulder with people. So, thinking through that comfort level as well, what can we do to make sure that we are either reassuring them or providing different choices so that people can kind of opt in based on their comfort level? This is complicated as well because we have to do things, right? Like we have to be productive people for our jobs and we have to make sure that we're delivering for our employer. But if we can do that in a different way, that is, more successful for a lifestyle, for feeling, more engaged with family and things like that. Those are different results that we might be after. So this is a much bigger conversation as well, but I think you are absolutely right that there are things that employees really appreciated about some of the changes that were made. And there were some learnings there too. Like leaders started realizing, maybe we can be productive in this way. Maybe we don't need to spend a lot of time in meetings like we used to, or maybe we can find a way to help people avoid those commutes. So I think there's a lot there to unpack, and I think every brand will probably have to grapple with those issues specifically. But I do think listening to your employees about what would they like to continue, that's a good place to reassure them too. I mean, every time we ask somebody for their opinion, that's a little act of reassurance as well, because we're saying we're listening to you. We want to hear from you. We want to make changes that you want. And so every time we reach out for feedback, that's a little act of engagement and reassurance. So, really, really good point.
Shifting gears just a bit, we had a question come in from email that I want to make sure we tackle. So this question is about journey mapping and Six Sigma. They ask, watching webinars related to customer journey maps, I noticed commonalities with the Six Sigma tool of value stream mapping. Are the concepts of service blueprints and customer journey maps related to Six Sigma methodologies, or can you talk about how those are developed and how
Mhm.
they're similar or different?
Sure, I will do my best with this one because I'm not a Six Sigma expert. I certainly know the basics, but that's about it. So I'm sure some of you black belts out there will correct me. So essentially, Six Sigma is about process, about how to continuously improve and use good processes in order to make everything better. And so when you look at it, some of the principles behind it are certainly applicable in customer experience work. And that's one of them is that you're supposed to be relentlessly focused on the customer, always focused on the customer. So that's certainly something that we bring into customer experience work. The other part of that is, there's an element of root cause analysis. Instead of just fixing a problem, make sure you're fixing the actual cause of it. Well, that's certainly something we want to apply in customer experience as well, specifically around customer journey mapping and service blueprinting. If we can identify those root causes, then we can proactively make changes to avoid those issues altogether. So there are all sorts of kind of principles that definitely align here. I would say that the one of the big differences, and again, I'm not an expert here, but this is what I've seen, is that Six Sigma tends to be internally focused on process. So we're doing a lot of things around really understanding the customer, but then really digging into that process inside the organization. With customer experience, we are constantly looking at things from that customer's perspective and starting there. So you've heard me caution about this before, but one of the things I've seen sometimes is we will be talking about customer journey maps and the executive will say, "Oh no, we did all that. We've got a ton of journey maps." And then what they show me is actually process maps. So it's that inside out perspective of what happens inside the organization. but not considering that viewpoint from the customer, which is really the power of using tools like customer journey mapping and service blueprinting. You are constantly looking at things from that customer's perspective, and that will uncover those points of friction, those points of frustration that you can eliminate with some of that root cause analysis. So they're not competing in any way. I would just say that they have different lenses, and that can actually help everybody deliver a better experience. So there are definitely aligned principles there, I would say, and some processes that really complement each other. I would say the biggest difference I see is about that viewpoint, that lens that we bring to the problem solving.
I think that's going to wrap it up for our questions this week. I just want to thank everybody again for being here and for your questions and comments. They make this such a complete experience, and we really appreciate it.
Yes, as always, it's so good to see you from all over the world, and you bring so much wisdom to this community and so many great questions to us. So
Mhm.
these topics that we tackle, a lot of them come directly from you. So feel free to let us know, what do you want to talk about? What would you like us to explore here on these LinkedIn Lives, on these Ask Me Anything webinars? Because that's why we're here. We're here to support what you're doing. And so if you have not already reached out, we love to hear from you from all these different ways. You can email us. We're on Twitter, Facebook. We have resources on our site, as well as don't forget about signing up for that Year of CX, which is a way to get a whole bunch of downloadable tools and resources. We have a newsletter, all of these different things really there to support the work that you're doing. Because we like to say around here that we work with enlightened leaders. And that means you. If you are here today, that means that you are an enlightened leader. You are looking to make positive change in your organization for your customers and for your employees as a result of that. So thank you for all that you do. Thank you for fighting the good fight for your customers. This is not always easy work. This is not always appreciated work, but it's so, so important, because at the end of the day, we are serving humans. We are serving one another. And the mission of my company is to create fewer ruined days for customers, because I really believe if we do that, we create a better world. So thank you for being here today. As always, thank you for reaching out with your questions, and thank you for all the work you do. We'll see you another